Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week we cover the 5 biggest stories on our websites and discuss the implications they might have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. Finally, if you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. We're also live every Friday at about 1:30 or so subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine to get a notification. Anna, how you doing this week?
Doing fine, thanks.
Yeah? Jeff?
Outstanding.
Outstanding. Everyone's doing well. And producer Alex, who had surgery less than 12 hours ago, is in the studio. And that is just incredible. And he's been here, it was less than 12 hours. I'd be 2 weeks out.
Less than 12.
Well, I mean, yeah. Because he went into surgery at 9 a.m. yesterday.
That is not
Less
math.
than 24.
24 hours.
There you go. I knew we'd get there.
I mean,
Not bad.
it hasn't been that long.
Either way, not recommended, Alex.
No, he's sitting. He's sitting.
All right.
It's also kind of weird that I can see your toes right now. Anyway.
Is it weird that you're looking at his toes?
I'm just looking in that area and all I see are toes.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you rate Alex's toes?
I mean, the 3 I see look pretty good right now. All right. Well, before we get started, we have a word from our sponsor.
Oil Eater's household cleaners, industrial cleaners, and industrial equipment are specifically designed to replace dangerous solvents and are used throughout the world. Our safe water-based formula dissolves grease and grime for almost any surface and leaves a fresh, non-chemical scent. Our ultra-concentrated formulas are perfect for light, medium, or heavy cleaning and can be used on shop floors, in parts washers, to clean equipment, and more. VOC compliant, Oil Eater will do an excellent job in a multitude of applications, safely and cost effectively, while reducing your chemical usage. Safe for the user, safe for the surfaces being cleaned, and safe for the environment. For more information, visit oileater.com or call 800-528-0334.
And we're back. And just a reminder that if you want to get a free sample of Oil Eater, please click the link below in the description. All right, our first story this week. Target is canceling orders from suppliers. American spending has shifted, and now Target is canceling orders, mostly for home goods and clothing. The company is also slashing prices to clear out inventory. But with inflation, I guess maybe that just means they'll go back to normal. Consumers quickly switched from spending money on their homes to experiences like traveling or go a night out or anywhere but the house. Shoppers also have less in discretionary budgets as inflation has drastically impacted grocery bills. Americans loaded up on big TVs and small kitchen appliances during the pandemic, but sales have faded, and Target has warehouses with products marked down to sell. Other retailers have had similar issues. Walmart recently told shareholders that 20% of its elevated inventory were items the company wishes it never had. Like everyone, Target is facing higher costs for everything from labor to transportation and shipping. Target is working with suppliers to cover costs for the vendors whose orders are being canceled. And in some cases, some of the raw materials that were meant for some goods will instead be used for other products in higher demand. And I thought of anything in the story, at least that was a bit of a silver lining.
Yeah, there's not been many silver linings from the supply chain crisis, especially as it pertains to consumers. But this might be, one of the first ones that you could get a really good deal on a TV. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
That's
TV and a toaster.
Yeah, that's what you get in return for all the other nonsense. Unfortunately, this is a finite benefit for consumers, right? Like, it's going to come back on the other side. The cancellations will impact the market in a few ways. One was actually immediate. Target's stock went plummeted after they sort of indicated that consumers were tightening their purse strings and they stopped buying big ticket items. And I think that contributes to that overall sentiment that you're seeing in the market of bearishness, or that the economy is in trouble, or at least in the short term. So secondly, Target had said that some of the bloated inventory were in categories that it, quote, misforecast. And I found that term interesting because Target, if anyone, has probably a lot of data science that goes into that forecasting process. And if they're getting it wrong, then you can see why every other business is getting it wrong. So will this amount to further liquidations and write-downs for businesses outside of retail? Well, we've already seen a bit of that in industrial. We saw a lot of distributors and manufacturers who were holding a glut of PPE, like after the immediate pandemic, and they started seeing cuts into their profits really like last year already.
Right.
Now it's happening in retail with other products, but I think the point I'm trying to make here is that, like, in America at least, I think we want to think that the pandemic is over.
It's over, yeah.
And that it's not impacting us anymore, but it is still impacting the supply chain, especially from a global standpoint. I mean, if you look at the shutdowns in China that were just lifted, right? They're saying it's going to take months for that supply chain to get back in order. And that's just one of the variables involved in this that's causing inflationary pressures, obviously, and shortages, right? I mean, the employment situation, the war in Ukraine, like all of that stuff's factoring in, and it's going to continue to change demand for all kinds of unrelated product categories.
No, well, it's my understanding, based on the comments sections and social media, that the pandemic is over, as well as all of its problems, and everything else is just a result of Joe Biden. Pretty sure that's it. I
agree.
So, Jeff, false. And no, we talk a lot about planning software, inventory management, and all these things to help businesses stay ahead of it. But when I see stories like this, you just understand that life is unpredictable, business is unpredictable, and sometimes you can still have all the best tools in place and still miss.
Oh, that seems like that should be like your wrap up for the podcast right there. You just want to shut her down now? Walk out? That's pretty good.
I want to shut you down now.
I thought one of the... Wow. Man, I guess you really like Joe Biden.
No, Papa Joe's not mine.
One of the more interesting stats that jumped out at me in the article was Target reported last month its profit for the fiscal first quarter tumbled 52%
Yikes.
compared with the same period last year. That is incredible. There's no way you could forecast that, and obviously it's reflected in their buying preferences here and things that they've been doing there. What also kind of jumped out at me was the two categories that we're talking about here. They'd also talked about Target potentially relying more heavily on a lot of groceries in terms of picking up the slack. So when you look at these two categories, consumer electronics and appliances, typically you have pretty good margins on those products. Food, not so much. It's more of a volume buy. You're talking about pennies on the dollar there. So as we shift from worse profit margin on these electronic devices and groceries still being in demand and something people are never going to stop buying, is that going to shift a little bit? Yeah. Are we going to see prices for food, which is already up for a number of reasons? Is it also going to be impacted by the fact that places like Target now need to compensate for the fact that other areas are they're losing money or just breaking even on? They need to make more off of food. I mean, are we going to be seeing a real shift in pricing models potentially? I think could be really interesting. And there's always and you know, there's a lot of give and take with it, but there's sort of that trickle down effect too. When you look at something as big as like the electronics and appliances, in terms of how is that going to affect everybody who's involved in the packaging, distribution. We don't make as much of that stuff here. That's mainly made over in China. But what kind of impact is that going to have on such a big market like consumer electronics too, and on other people? So it's a couple of really interesting dynamics for some converging market categories here.
Well, and Anna, to your point, isn't that kind of what you had mentioned when you said, you know, we're going to see it on the other side? Many of the orders for products are being canceled. Also already have a long production lead time, so you know many of them weren't made. Target also announced that it's going to add 5 distribution centers over the next 2 fiscal years, which apparently is also going to take a bit of a cut as well in terms of its profit margin. All right. Our next most popular story this week. 3 U.S. companies sanctioned for sending blueprints to China. On Wednesday, 3 U.S. companies were accused of sending blueprints and technical drawings for satellites, rocket technology, and other defense prototypes to China. As a result, the Commerce Department blocked the companies from exporting items to foreign countries for 180 days in a temporary denial order. A temporary denial order is regarded as one of the most severe civil sanctions available. Quicksilver Manufacturing, Rapid Cut, and U.S. Prototype provide 3D printing services, among others. The Commerce Department says customers would send blueprints and drawings to the companies to be 3D printed, but then the companies would send that work to China. That transaction requires U.S. government approval, which wasn't requested. Matthew Axelrod, an Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Export Enforcement, said, quote, outsourcing 3D printing of space and defense prototypes to China harms U.S. national security. These companies may have saved a few bucks, but they did so at the collective expense of protecting U.S. military technology. Anna, sounds like they got a firm scolding and a slap on the hand.
Don't ever do it again.
You have a half a year to think about it.
You know, we talk about these types of scenarios regularly, and this one surprised me because the language of this report makes it sound like the problem was, I don't know, maybe one of due diligence? I don't know. It's hard to tell if it was like willful.
Right.
But, I mean, these companies, which appear to be kind of part of the same umbrella,
they're definitely all the same
Yeah,
companies.
they like share a mailbox, I think. Yeah, a P.O. box. So they outsource this critical service to China, which has some serious implications. But if this practice is so damaging to national security, why is one of the most severe punishments a 180-day export ban? Like, if they can't operate without these global partners and the idea is to cripple them as punishment, then why not just shut them down? I mean, this is defense technology, and you almost wonder, like, why isn't there a zero strike policy on this type of infraction? It seems like we've seen many, like, way harsher penalties on individuals who have shared files or sensitive information with foreign companies in these types of cases. I guess I don't understand. There must be something I'm missing here as to why the penalty is so light.
I think the part of it was in the wording, right? It said that this is the strictest or one of the most severe things that the Commerce Department can do, which was kind of, I interpreted that as our hands are tied otherwise. This is the worst we can do, but, we can't really do anything else to these companies. Jeff, is that how you read it?
Well, I think there's a couple different factors. First of all, it's the wrong entity going after these folks. It's the Department of Commerce as opposed to the Department of Justice or the Department of Defense. That's who's really impacted and should be more heavily involved. But really, I think there's a bigger issue here. If you look at those companies' websites, it is very apparent they're service bureaus. They are a facilitator. Not bashing that in any way, shape, or form, but how much responsibility is it of them to look at what they're doing for their customer and realizing if it's sensitive national security information?
Yeah.
I think the onus of responsibility is misplaced here. It goes back to these companies' customers.
Agreed.
Okay, they're the ones that got the contract from the Department of Defense or whomever. And if they want to use a subcontractor like any of these folks, that's also fine. But you can't transfer, you know inherently, even though the claim said these customers did not know their information was going to be sent to China. Come on.
Yeah.
Anybody who looks at these websites and has worked with these service bureaus knows they're going to find a low-cost manufacturer, and in many instances, that means going offshore. That is understood. So for them to basically blindly put their faith in these companies and these service bureaus to get the parts made that they needed and not do the due diligence to understand it could go overseas and that's going to create a bigger problem, that's on them. I don't think the responsibility should be on these other folks that ended up getting the fine, whether it's Rapid Cut, what was the other one? Quicksilver.
Yeah, or U.S. Prototype.
Again, we know who those folks are. The customers themselves who are given these contracts by the DoD and then basically just blindly turned over these blueprints because they wanted a low-cost manufacturer, they're the ones who are at fault here. And I think that's the bigger issue.
You don't think that they have any responsibility?
I think they're taking the order. And they're probably not looking, maybe they need to look at it more thoroughly and see what it is. But at the end of the day, they're saying, okay, look, you need these parts. These parts could be used potentially on anything. They don't necessarily understand the application being rockets, satellites, Department of Defense. If it's a satellite, it could be for a, Amazon. It could be for a streaming service. It could be for anybody.
Well, it's also I guess it is a full blueprint. But I mean, they just said it was satellite and rocket technology. So it could have just been components.
It could have been hardware.
Yeah, components. But I think they have some responsibility on both ends because, again, we talk about communication a lot. But, really, I wonder if the DoD went after their customers as a result of these plans being leaked to China, and then it kind of trickled down that way, and they kind of passed the buck, so to speak. But I agree with you, Jeff. Like, how many times do we talk to people that have DoD contracts, and they are so tight-lipped, they won't even talk to us about it?
Well, that's the thing. There's a process for getting approved to be a Department of Defense contractor. Now, Quicksilver and Rapid Cut and these other folks, that's not on them. They're just a service provider. They're just getting out. They're part of the outsourcing situation. They didn't get the contract. These other companies did.
But we don't know if those other companies did dictate how it needed to be done, and this company just went outside of that. That information is not available
what do
to
you
us.
mean?
Well, maybe their customers specifically said, like, hey,
These are the rules.
Yeah, they can't be manufactured out, offshore. And because that is the one thing, to your point, where you say, like, you inherently think that these are going to be shopped overseas for cheaper manufacturing. And not with all service bureaus, I don't think that's the case. And I do think that, it's not something that's just generally understood.
You can specify that, obviously, when you're working with these bureaus and say, hey, don't send it anywhere. But when you read the complaint, all it said is these companies didn't know that Quicksilver and these other places were going to send them to China. That was the only part of it.
Right.
They didn't say, we said don't do it, we said this is sensitive, nothing like that. So I do think there's still an onus on those original customers to be more diligent in outsourcing this stuff.
Well, and so the 11-page Commerce Department order also does not allege that the blueprints wound up being exploited by the Chinese military, but it does say that it was the actions that presented, quote, serious national security concerns. And U.S. officials have warned in the past about blurred lines between military and private industry. There's also something to be said about how when you do things like this, it is going to impact your business permanently in terms of customer reviews. So this just came out yesterday, and when we're recording this podcast, it was Thursday, and there are already people that are just leaving reviews for these companies online that'll probably stick to those companies indefinitely. One person in particular, he goes by George Payer, And he just wrote, anti-American scumbag company outsourced 3D printing of blueprints for satellite, rocket, and defense prototypes from U.S. companies to, wait for it, China.
1 star.
1 star, yeah, and that is the only review for, I believe, Quicksilver, and that is going to be there as long as they're that company and they're on Google. And so you just really have to think about, if it is on these companies trying to make a buck, because like a lot of the quotes made it seem like they were doing this to try and make a little bit of money, to do things on the cheap. You got to think about the long-term ramifications to your business.
Yeah, and I just think like if there's an expectation in the supply chain that people are going to comply with like the regulatory aspect of whatever the product is. So I don't think that the original company, the designer, should be exonerated by any means, but I don't think that this last line of defense person who sent this overseas should just be all like we do nothing.
Yeah.
It just...
You don't think they should be the mope? There's more than one mope?
I think, multiple mopes, yeah.
Okay. All right, very good. Well, our next most popular story this week, Deere moves production to Mexico amid tight labor market. Labor market struggles have proven to be too much for Deere & Company, so the company is moving some production to Mexico. The agriculture equipment manufacturer is relocating cab production from Waterloo, Iowa to a components plant in Ramos Arizpe, Mexico. The relocation could affect some 250 employees, and the move could be completed by 2024. However, according to the Des Moines Register, the total number of employees might be less, depending on production volume and employee attrition over the next 2 years. The company said the move will, quote, balance workforce needs within the tight labor market and open up space to manufacture new products. But the company didn't say what those new products might be. Late last year, some 10,000 UAW workers at Deere & Company plants went on a 5-week strike, most of them in Iowa. Now, Jeff, Deere says the strike wasn't a factor in its decision to move. But maybe it is.
Yeah, I'm going to call BS on that one. I'm sorry. I don't buy that for a bit. It's got to be in response. And I think the UAW probably saw this coming.
Yeah.
When you look at and really it's hard if you're one of these individuals affected, but if you're looking at getting raises for 10,000 people and then potentially losing 250 jobs over the next couple of years, you're probably going to take that if you do know what's coming. And if you're John Deere, you also have to, you can see where they're coming from a little bit. The starting wages down in Mexico are about $3.50 an hour for entry-level manufacturing jobs. Maybe this is a little bit more than that because it is John Deere. Still, that's comparable to somewhere between $13 and $16 or $17 an hour in Iowa. Okay, so there's undoubtedly a cost savings involved there. And if they do have extra space in this Mexico facility, they can save money doing it. They just, again, took care of 10,000 workers. I think this is definitely in response to that.
Anna, your thoughts on John Deere moving the jobs over to Mexico?
Yeah, I agree with Jeff that this is I don't know if I would say retaliation, but I do agree with some of your points that they're taking advantage of there's a cost impetus here, and I think they're kind of maybe blaming it on something else. I accuse Deere of nothing here, but the situation's interesting, I think, in the sense that we've seen so many companies publicly bemoan this labor crisis, but Deere might be the first one to actually contend that it's the core issue that's driving it to move offshore. Whether or not that's true, and it may very well be, I do think we might see more of this, where a business has maybe been wanting to offshore, but they haven't because they don't want to deal with the associated backlash. But now might be an actually perfect time to just say, I can't get enough workers here, Yeah. And I mean, it's different. When a company's leaving a town destitute and just adding to their corporate profits by moving to Mexico, people are mad. But are they less mad right now when somebody says, "Hey, we just can't get Americans to work here"? I don't know. Maybe this is the time that you can kind of sneak that play in. It's just such a strange shift right now with this job market. I mean, I read recently that the average over history is. For every available job, there are 2 job seekers, and for the first time in history now, there's less than 1 worker for every available job.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for the manufacturing industry? And as they go out and try to I don't know, curry favor with these regions because they're going to create jobs. Will we see less of this like massive scramble for jobs just for the sake of jobs? Or, will the tax break system change a little bit? Will politicians who peg themselves as job creators like move on to something else? I don't know, because like right now it's just not something that everybody needs, I guess. It's just not as compelling of a case to make. So I don't know.
Well, it's interesting, too, because there's this push right now in terms of a lot of reshoring and foreign direct investment creating more manufacturing jobs in the U.S. The Reshoring Initiative just came out with a report. I was going to talk about this a little bit later as well, but like 260,000 jobs as a result of either reshoring or FDI last year. And that is a result from the pandemic, people wanting to shore up their supply chains, get more stuff closer to their consumers here in the U.S. So you can also sort of hide this in some of those announcements. The PR fallout is not what it nearly was in the past.
Well, so John Deere still hires still employs 6,600 people in Iowa. So I think it's the largest, if not one of the largest employers in the state. And I guess I don't think it's as close to retaliation as you guys, like Jeff, is your cost-cutting sort of. I don't think it's that, because last year, John Deere came out and said, hey, we're looking to hire dozens of workers in Iowa if we could find them.
I think retaliation maybe is too strong of a word, but a response to it.
Yeah.
I think in terms of finding the dollars, because look, you can talk about record profits and all that stuff all you want. Corporate boards are going to do what they're going to do to make shareholders happy. Okay, that's just going to happen. Yeah. But if they were looking at a way to sort of ease some of those cost increases in terms of paying people better, this is a way they can do that.
Well, they also said that the percentage of people, or it's also a fact that the percentage of people in the state willing to work hasn't recovered at the same rate as the nation's since the pandemic hit. Iowa had roughly 61,000 fewer people either working or looking for work, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. So the pool's just not out there. Iowa employers have, looked to immigrants to help boost a workforce, but that's also been difficult because of COVID and tighter U.S. immigration policies. Peter Orazem, who is an Iowa State University labor economist, said that Iowa needs to work harder to attract workers to the state or face the possibility that more companies might be looking to move operations. In response to that, Debbie Durham told the Des Moines Register that Debbie Durham, who is the Iowa Economic Development Authority's director, disagrees and says that the tight labor market isn't unique to Iowa, but that the state is actually in a better position than others because its economy is growing. So, I mean,
okay.
Debbie Durham says generic statement, but I thought it was interesting that there are more than 60,000 fewer people in the Iowa workforce, and I mean that has to strain things incredibly.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's dealing with it. We've talked about that in a number of instances before.
Yeah. All right, well, our next most popular story. Jeep tips over for second time in crash test. A Jeep Wrangler had a hiccup during a crash test by the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. During a, quote, small overlap crash test, a 2022 model tipped onto its side. The test crashes the car into a test barrier at 40 miles per hour, but only the outermost part of the bumper makes contact with the barrier. The crash is rare, but it could be extremely dangerous. The Wrangler earned a, quote, marginal rating, the second lowest. After a similar issue in 2019, Jeep engineers modified a suspension component. Automakers often conduct crash tests themselves, but the IIHS performs its own tests to check the automaker's results. And according to an IIHS spokesperson, this is the only vehicle model to ever tip over during the trial. Still, Jeeps are a little bit known for this.
Yeah, so Jeep does have a bit of a checkered history, I think, when it comes to tipping and flipping. So SUVs, as you probably know, are more likely to tip or flip than cars, right? They just have a higher center of gravity. It just, makes sense. But the article mentioned some issues with the 2019 crash tests where that Jeep tipped over and engineers attempted to fix, something that may not have worked, I guess. Yeah. But Jeeps in particular have got some really bad press back in the 2000s. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but it was the first thing I thought of when I saw the story. But there were two auto magazines that tested the Jeep Liberty back in, I think, 2002. One accidentally flipped it during the test, a magazine. So I don't even know if it was one of us. flipped it during a 40-mile-per-hour zigzag test. The other auto magazine suggested that the vehicle had uncertain handling and should be recalled.
Oh.
Yeah, which is pretty bold coming from a trade magazine. But anyway, Jeep later redesigned that model to make it shorter. Jeeps tend to be light, tall, narrow, which are all contributing factors, and they do have a reputation of more easily tipping and flipping than even other SUVs. This hasn't seemed to impact the popularity of many of Jeep's models. It's not uncommon to see, 2-3 Jeep models in like the top 10 best-selling vehicles in the U.S. in the last few years. They typically make those lists. So I don't know. I know people want to emphasize the role of the driver in these accident scenarios, and I agree. But I think let's also remember that there are issues of experience, weather, terrain, lots of other factors. I don't know. You have to... As an automaker, you do have some responsibility to try to fix these problems when you see them occurring in these tests, right? So, I don't know. Will Jeep say that these aren't real-world tests again? Because that's what they claimed in 2002. Yeah. They were just like, this isn't the real world. So, and maybe they will say, they said that about the Auto Magazine tests at that time too, that they were not real world driving. But I think that they need to take some responsibility and figure this out.
Well, didn't they say that they couldn't recreate the same scenario when they tried running their own tests?
I guess, but I don't feel comfortable with that excuse.
No, I don't think that's an excuse. Really, what it did for me was it kind of made you give a new respect to product developers because they can plan for everything, try to engineer out every possible safety critical issue and still miss something.
Right.
But in every case, it seems like Jeep has gone back, made design changes, and made it right.
Well, they didn't make it right.
Or not.
They're trying to.
Trying to make it right.
So we'll go there. Did you watch any of the video of this test?
No.
Like on a regular vehicle versus a Jeep?
No.
It would make, it's scary.
Like you don't want to put your kids in that.
Like, it would make you realize if you're going to have one of these vehicles, encountering this type of crash, which is extremely rare and odd, like it's a risk when you're driving. That these tests were basically designed more for airbags and roll cage testing, as opposed to the bumper, or the structural stability or suspension or anything like that of the vehicle. So it's interesting because when you see it basically, being hit on that right or left quarter, it doesn't matter what side. Every other vehicle, it's a lot of damage because you're going 40 miles an hour. You have to go to YouTube actually if you're trying to pull that up.
Oh, gotcha.
But it levels that side of the vehicle, but the car stays on 4 tires. Man, those Jeeps, as soon as they hit that barrier, it flips immediately. It is actually kind of frightening. So you're kind of caught between this dynamic of that's the way these vehicles are built, that's the way they're designed. They do have that higher center of gravity. They're not going to be as stable when they encounter this type of crash. I don't know if there's anything you can do to really out-design that because this is basic physics. It's what it is. So I don't think Jeep is kind of turning a blind eye to it. Like you said, Wranglers continue to sell extremely well. They're a really popular vehicle, but it's probably good to know in this type of environment or in this type of setting, or if you ever encounter this type of crash, you are at greater risk in a Jeep. So
do you think people know?
I don't know. Because it's not... it's not a mandated test, right? It's something that they do so they can put out these ratings and make the consumer more informed. I don't know how widely recognized they would be, or even how much people would seek it out to know it or understand it. Because when you think of a Jeep, this isn't the type of driving you're thinking about. You're thinking about being able to go over stuff and get off road and enjoy that type of dynamic. In which case, you need the vehicle built the way it's built to do those things. So, to me, it does feel like a trade-off. I don't know if Jeep. Maybe Jeep does need to do more to educate their drivers, but at the same time, there's also a personal responsibility you have when you buy a vehicle and know about it.
No, I understand that. And actually watching the video of the test, so other cars, when they do this test, they don't tip over? Because it just,
it's just Jeeps.
Yeah.
I can actually, we got one right here if you want to... Well, I don't have that one right up, but if you see another vehicle that does the same test, it does not flip. It's violent. Okay, it is a horrible impact, but it's the airbags and it's everything else, and you see the cage stay together, and the vehicle basically just kind of shudders off to the side.
No, you're right. And it's not. It is 40 miles per hour, which the first time I ever got into an accident, it was at 25 miles per hour, and it really opened my eyes as to how much damage you could do at 25 miles per hour. And you're right. Watching this test footage is kind of crazy. crazy how you think it's just going to kind of like run and maybe scoot over, but it just completely flips over.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, they haven't fixed the issue yet, but historically it has seemed like when an issue like this has come up, Jeep has made a change. Stellantis also said that, we consider third-party testing and factor it into our product development process, but we engineer our vehicles for real-world performance. Oh, man, so maybe they're not doing anything. That's a bummer.
I mean, maybe it
see.
is just
We'll give 'em
education and putting the word out.
Yeah. Well, frequent commenter Seth says, Jeepers gonna Jeep. And I mean, honestly, that's true. You're not gonna, anyone like Des, when we're driving, Des knows truck, van, car, Jeep. Like, they're out there everywhere, and they are a passionate bunch.
Interesting side note, I was doing some research on this story. Did you know they tried to put water into bumpers as like a safety feature?
Huh.
They experimented with basically, it was going to be like basically if you're in an accident, the bumper's just shot anyway.
Yeah.
So they put water in there thinking that if you hit,
It
would basically take
Well,
a
like
lot of that
absorb the
impact
impact?
and absorb the energy
Exterior
and stuff like
airbag?
that. Yeah, but
Water
then
bag?
it just got so expensive whenever these vehicles were in any type of accident because the bumper would essentially
there's a water balloon.
yeah, just kind of
So
explode.
weird.
So,
I mean,
interesting approach or thought process, I guess, for bumper design.
they can't all be winners.
yeah.
It's like, I mean, I hope it was the person who, invented waterbed technology. He's like, what if,
Yeah.
I can jump into this bed from anywhere.
Well, I mean,
and it's a soft
the water
landing.
barrels on the highway work, right?
Yeah.
So why not just put it on the bumper?
Or what if we stuffed them full of like confetti and then like getting into a fender bender, you're just like, oh, all right,
It's
guys.
kind of a
like,
party.
Yeah, this is actually kind of fun.
Yeah, but then you're covered in that nonsense. Just, you're sweaty, you're angry, and it keeps sticking to you, and you're like, I can't get it off. It's like being at the, walking out of a concert.
As long as it's not glitter.
And you just,
Sorry,
it's a
I'm
glitter bomb.
covered in bumper confetti.
It turns out the new
Bumper
Gremlin EV is going to have bumper confetti. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, our most popular story this week has to do with Walmart, coconuts, and monkeys. Here we go. Walmart pulls coconut milk amid forced monkey labor allegations. Walmart is the latest major retailer to drop Chow Cow. Coconut milk brands, the Choco coconut milk brand, after allegations of forced monkey labor. Other retailers, including Target, Costco, and Kroger, already dropped the brand following powerful PETA pressure. In 2019, PETA investigators in Thailand found out that the coconut supplier was using chained-up monkeys to pick the fruit. The next year, a follow-up investigation found that many farms were still using monkey labor, as well as operating monkey schools and running coconut picking competitions with the animals. The brand said it contracted a company to conduct a monkey-free coconut due diligence assessment in 2020. The company said the assessment, which involved site tours and personal interviews, turned up no evidence of monkeys being used for coconut harvesting. And Jeff, they've got no reason to lie.
They don't. Or they do. Here's my thing. This company has gone and spent a lot of money and done a lot of stuff to try to dispel this situation, okay? They have produced the audit reports. They've been on this since last year, basically saying, hey, we're clean. We are not doing this. We're not sourcing from farms that use monkey slaves, okay, basically. And I think they deserve a little bit of credit for that. Now, I'm not going to lose any sleep. If Walmart wants to choose a different supplier for whatever reason, that's fine. But if this company is doing all of the due diligence and producing reports and using third-party auditors to basically say, we're not doing this, and the sole reason that they're losing customers is because PETA is basically bullying a store into doing this, I think that sets a dangerous precedent. I'm not worried so much about this Thailand-based company, but PETA has a history of doing this, okay? I can appreciate the passion, and I can appreciate where they started and what their overall overarching goals are. I'm not trying to advocate inhumane treatment of animals, okay?
Right.
But when you see a company like this, or anywhere, saying, you know what, this was wrong, we fixed it. We're also working with a number of these farms to make sure they're not doing this. They said they have made touch with over half of the farms in Thailand and can verify that they are no longer doing this practice, and they're going to continue to push these efforts to reform their industry. I think PETA can call off the dogs a little bit here.
Oh, but they don't. PETA's already on to the next one. Like,
and that's my issue here. My issue is not, look, Walmart, maybe it was the right move for them to do. I'm not worried about that. What I don't like it is when you've got somebody who's relying on information that is more than 2 years old, which is what PETA is using, and there's been changes in the situation since, and they're still trying to use this pressure and this clout to basically force a retailer to make a decision that may or may not be in their best interest. I have no idea, but potentially is going to hurt this company. Now, if this was a U.S. company, I would probably feel a little more strongly about it. But again, it concerns me that an organization like this can basically grab a bunch of headlines without having all the facts and bully somebody into making a decision.
No, they're on to the next one is 99 Ranch Market. So PETA basically, all the retailers that we mentioned before, PETA got them to drop it. I mean, that was one of the things that I noticed is when the story came out, I was like, Costco did this like two years ago.
I know.
So it seemed like, I thought part of the story was going to be what took Walmart so long. And really, maybe Walmart saw that the company was trying to do things right and just eventually succumbed to the pressure. I don't know. What do you think, Anna? Monkey slaves?
I mean, I do think that PETA has a history of bullying. I agree with you there. People take a really hard line on PETA. Either you hate PETA or you don't. There's no middle ground.
Polarizing,
they are polarizing, but I don't think that they have a history of like making things up. And I think like it's hard to take this company's word for it to say that we've hired these third-party auditors. We're doing all these things to fix this problem. I haven't really seen any evidence of that, like looking through some of the stories that have been published. You hear about this all the time where people are being exploited in the supply chain, and these companies overseas just they say that they're doing this X, Y, and Z. Even American manufacturers say like they have a handle on their supply chains, and they really don't. So I can understand, I think, why PETA is like still pushing this really hard, even though this company is saying like we're trying to solve the problem. It's like, what credibility necessarily do they have to say that we believe them over somebody else? I don't know. It's kind of a he said, she said, right? But we do know that they were doing this before. And what to me, it's like less about the monkeys. I can't believe we're talking about this. Monkeys contributing to the labor force, but like rather how it was being done, because it was characterized as like these monkeys were being abducted from their families and chained up all day, and like that's really awful and horrible.
It was very sensationalized, and it definitely looked like a PETA video where they had 5 clips of probably the worst treatment towards monkeys that were used in a 1.5-minute video.
But I mean, do you look at that and say like, oh, it's probably better than that?
No, I don't. Okay. And that's why it's like something has to be done.
Right.
Because my take on this is that, first of all, enslaved monkeys? Like, if they were treated better, I don't have a real problem with this practice of using monkey labor to harvest coconuts. Some horrible thing, they're accused of some horrible things, like pulling teeth out of these monkeys that if they were to get violent. But it reminds me of any animal-touching industrial operation. There are bad actors, and this seems like they found a solution to a problem in the supply chain, and then there are bad actors that did a horrible job doing it, and as a result, like, now anyone thinks of a coconut, they think that an enslaved monkey whose teeth have been ripped out have milked that coconut.
I know, but like it's frustrating to me when we set up these like false dichotomies about this stuff. Like, oh, if somebody on our website, well, is it better than if now children are going to pick the coconuts? No, none of that. Point. Like, that's not what this is, right? Like, maybe this is an industry that we can't get that can of coconut milk for $2.50. Maybe that's not a sustainable practice. You know what I mean? And some of the stuff I think the light needs to be shined on some of these practices, and we need to change some of our buying behavior and our expectations on what we can get for our dollar when this is behind it, But we've
also used animals as a tool in the past, and if they can be used, in a humane manner,
it's good.
Well, it's improved processing in a couple of different areas. The things that PETA has done is actually improved food safety in a lot of instances in the way animals are cared for before they are processed, okay? That's a benefit. That's something PETA has done. They've also actually improved product development in a lot of cases with the impact that they've had on product testing for different things and using animals that way. So there is some benefit. I just get really frustrated when they get so passionate that they're almost blinded by what's going on.
Yeah, they kind of get they get tunnel vision, and it is because that was the only thing is that I don't want to seem like I'm siding with these monsters who are out there ripping out teeth and like not allowing monkeys to socialize. But
you're anti-monkey. That's just a
but
weird position to take.
I mean, really, if I'm a monkey and I get to go to monkey school to learn how to race in a coconut picking competition,
Pretty sweet.
It's not so bad. Sounds probably better than a lot of zoos.
I think no matter where anyone is on this, like at this point in this campaign, Walmart is crazy to not drop this brand. There's too much brand damage associated with it. Well, whether that makes you mad that this company goes down for it, I understand. But like at this point, I mean, people love monkeys except for David. And then
I'm lukewarm.
Love monkeys.
I just think like, okay, so Walmart's trying to compete with like Target's like Sunny brand, let's have a barbecue. Like they can't afford to like.
I don't. Yeah, but I don't understand what took them so long. And I also don't understand why this Chowco hasn't rebranded already. Like, I mean, your brand is toxic as of 3 years ago.
Here.
Yeah,
okay,
true.
here in the U.S.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and again, we just talked about accountability in the supply chain. They don't actually, they're sourcing from these farms. Okay. They're not enslaving the monkeys themselves. Okay.
Yeah.
But they do have a responsibility to make sure they're diligent in their sourcing. One thing that's interesting too, I mean, this is in Thailand. That's like the 9th leading producer of coconuts. So there's lots of places you can source this stuff from too.
So where are they in terms of like monkey populations?
7th.
Okay.
Made that up.
Okay.
Did it sound good?
Very convincing. Very convincing. I'm like, I didn't think he'd have that follow-up.
Yeah,
Just like,
that's weird that you know that.
he's got the list popped up. Like, actually, Wisconsin has the most monkeys. All right. And I am not anti-monkey. I'm, you could look into the many totes in my basement that prove that I have for a long time been pro-monkey, particularly when it comes to a stuffed version of the animal.
We'll just have to roll the footage and kind of.
I don't think we're done with this.
Review what was said.
I will bring in.
On record.
You keep them in your basement.
Yes,
It
I
sounds
do
like,
keep the monkeys in my basement.
David, okay.
Yeah, no, where they're safe in their totes.
Do they have?
With
Do
my
they?
Totes?
With my memories,
Store
yeah.
monkeys in totes?
I mean, I've got a
Gross.
dryer sheet in there so that way they don't get,
David.
moths. Oh, monkey love. All right, well, before we move on to In Case You Missed It, we have a word from our sponsor.
Oil Eater's household cleaners, industrial cleaners, and industrial equipment are specifically designed to replace dangerous solvents and are used throughout the world. Our safe water-based formula dissolves grease and grime for almost any surface and leaves a fresh, non-chemical scent. Our ultra-concentrated formulas are perfect for light, medium, or heavy cleaning and can be used on shop floors, in parts washers, to clean equipment, and more. VOC compliant, Oil Eater will do an excellent job in a multitude of applications, safely and cost effectively, while reducing your chemical usage. Safe for the user, safe for the surfaces being cleaned, and safe for the environment. For more information, visit oileater.com or call 800-528-0334.
All right, and we're back with In Case You Missed It. The stories that maybe weren't as popular on the website, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. Before we get into that, Anna, is the enslaved monkey worse because it's a monkey and that's so close to a human? Would it be different if it was like enslaved possums?
I'm super glad you brought this up.
Maybe for a final thought. Anna, what's your In Case You Missed It this week?
My In Case You Missed It is a story that we ran earlier in the week titled Pink Slips Hit All-Time Low. And I think that does not need an explanation. Pink slips hit all-time low. The U.S. Department of Labor recently released data that underscores the challenges facing businesses when it comes to retention. And shortages have become so severe that employers appear to be actively avoiding terminating existing employees. So the report says that this number of workers being fired or laid off has hit the lowest point on record. But keep in mind, record started like 25 years ago. It's not like going back to
like in the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, I selected this story to discuss because, we've talked a lot about the leverage pendulum and how workers suddenly have a lot more negotiating power. But what was interesting about this recent study is just how much and the other implications. One thing I thought of is, are people who would normally be fired for cause not being fired?
100%.
That's actually the 100%. First thing I thought of. Yeah.
Because, we talk a ton about safety concerns on this podcast. And you think about, why are people getting fired usually? Maybe making mistakes, being incompetent, concerns of culture, toxic people in the workplace, who knows? But those are the kind of things that might force somebody out. Now, the report doesn't really go into detail. It's just looking at this raw data coming out of the Department of Labor, but it does raise some interesting questions as to who these people are and why they're not being canned now when they were previously. But on the flip side, I feel like there's a little bit of an opportunity silver lining here. If you look at maybe people are being given more time to prove themselves that would not have gotten that opportunity before. We know that there's still some discrimination happening in the workforce. There's definitely this workforce that kind of exists in the shadows, ready to be tapped into, that's not being actively recruited to now. I interviewed one industrial company a couple weeks ago, and they talked about how they have found so much talent by enabling a path for marginalized workers, like those with a criminal history, and given those folks a chance to prove themselves. And they found a lot of success with that. They're like, we don't ask a lot of questions because it's not relevant to us. And what we do, we bring them in, we put them to work, and we see what they can do. So I wonder if we see more businesses maybe getting out of their comfort zones and using the current market as an opportunity to explore those avenues when they haven't in the past. So it's sort of a nuanced story when you think about there's some good to it here, maybe.
Yeah. But
there's also some kind of scary questions to be raised about are people that are kind of sticking around ones that we don't want sticking around,
Well, to your point, it's really encouraging that whatever that industrial company is, that companies like them are taking a chance on an otherwise, like you said, marginalized workforce. Anecdotally, I can say that 100% people that are normally fired are not getting fired, and they know that they are empowered to do that, because some of the stories that I hear coming out of factories where people are just like, you want to make me do that? I'll quit. And they know they won't get fired. And they know that they can threaten to do it and get out of work. It's just like, oh, you want to make that change? Change it back. Otherwise, I'll quit. And so there is kind of a bad part of it, where workers could feel more empowered to, kind of rise up the ranks a little bit more if they kind of worked harder. I think there's an element of people that would have normally been fired know that they need them regardless.
Yeah.
And so as a result, they're taking advantage of that power, and it's probably hurting a lot of companies. Same thing with, and I know that I've mentioned it before in the podcast, about companies that are hiring people that were rehiring people that were terminated, not just once, but twice or 3 times.
Yikes.
And if you're already rehiring people that you fired before, maybe now you're just like, all right, I'm not even going to go through the paperwork of firing you.
Well, I think I'm going to go back to a positive element of it.
Sorry.
I think one of the positives of these fewer pink slip stories that I thought about too is I think there's more pressure on the mid to upper level management to really develop people and really, because if something's not going right in your department, you can say, well, we need new people. These folks aren't doing their job. Well, hey man, you hired them, okay? And you know how hard it was to hire people before. This is your team. You got to work with them. And I think it puts more pressure on those folks to develop those teams, get away from sitting behind the desk and really get your hands dirty and work with them. So I think that's a potential positive that can make a lot of companies stronger by making some of those managers who are pretty comfortable before and sort of being able to pass the buck. Now they have to make things happen.
Yeah, true.
Could also empower those employees to be worse, knowing that the pressures on the middle manager get him fired, then take his job.
Be worse. I like that.
At some point, I think the story was there are not 0 pink slips. It's just that there's fewer.
Still some pink slips. Yeah.
All right. Mine, in case you missed it, was an article written by Nolan Beilstein about how shopping malls are being converted into micro distribution hubs. So it's about this company, PhilLogic, and they provide localized logistics and logistics as a service, mostly for retail. The company takes underutilized spaces, primarily shopping malls, and converts them into tech-enabled micro-distribution hubs. Now, the company employs about 100 people, but it grew 9,000% last year, which either means that the previous year was a bit, new. They were new, and then they exploded. But either way, last year was a banger. PhilLogic helps mall owners, retailers, and transportation providers through an aggregated B2B logistics and technology platform. It uses existing infrastructure to operate and provide logistics and technology solutions to increase efficiency and make last-mile delivery more cost-effective. Their CEO, Bob Thayer, says that a lack of capacity is the biggest issue in supply chain struggles. The pandemic started unprecedented demand, and now we don't have enough people, boats, planes, trucks, and buildings to handle it. Adding capacity for a much lower cost and much more efficiently seems to be working for PhilLogic and their partners. Now, PhilLogic could use alternative types of industrial real estate, but it really doesn't want to compete with traditional industrial real estate because it's expensive. What's not expensive right now? Spots in malls. You can get it for nothing. Now, they're helping stores get organized and help them with e-commerce fulfillment by turning unused space into essentially mini Amazon fulfillment centers. And I just thought this was a really cool idea. And I'm also just naturally intrigued with what is going to happen to shopping malls in America. Mm-hmm. We've seen some companies turning them into condos, and we've seen other companies, one just turned like an old JCPenney into a pickleball court. Mm-hmm. So people are getting creative, and this was a solution that seemed to solve a lot of problems.
I think we've seen this on a micro level, and this outfit has really taken it much bigger and really blown it up. Obviously assisted by the growth in e-commerce that was brought on by the pandemic, but really a smart idea. I mean, we see it here on the west side. A couple of those anchors for that mall in the Westtown Mall, they're done. Yeah. And they're definitely going to be repurposed. Doing something like this where there's not a ton of infrastructure investment that's needed too, in terms of keeping costs down, good paying jobs for folks that are looking for it. Yeah, smart idea and well executed, obviously, with the growth that they're seeing.
Yeah, instead of turning it into a trampoline park, they just need shelves. Mm-hmm. A little bit of lower cost entry. Yeah. So, or another craft brewery movie place.
Easy.
What?
Oh, Jeff's mad.
Oh, okay, never mind. Hey, we all got plans tonight. It's all right, Jeff. It's all right. I'm sure it's going to be a good one.
I don't have plans.
Do you want to go to the craft brewery movie house?
Okay.
See?
Anna, what were your thoughts on these micro fulfillment centers?
Yeah, I liked it. As much as I love a good BuzzFeed slideshow of abandoned shopping mall photos.
Yes, those are awesome.
I know they're awesome, but we have a problem in America of tearing things down that we don't need anymore, and then putting up almost identical buildings on top of them. So, yeah, if we can utilize buildings that already exist and use them to their capacity, I think that's such a great idea. I mean, like you said, people are getting creative. We need more of that. That's perfect.
Like with a BuzzFeed headline, American wasteland right before our eyes. See nature reclaim an old Boston store. It's so there's a weed in it. So right.
I don't know, I was looking at a weird thing on Atlas Obscura today about old amusement parks around the world that have just become overgrown. It is creepy.
So creepy.
I love
cool.
that article. Between amusement parks and then old Olympic stadiums.
Yeah, those are good too.
Goodness, what a waste of resources.
Sad world.
But it gave us 10 minutes of entertainment, so totally worth it.
Maybe even 15 if it had a lot of photos in the gallery. Jeff, what is in case you missed it this week?
Mine, I picked a story talking about senators are urging CNH Industrial to offer striking workers more. So we covered this about a month ago. I think it was actually on the podcast. We talk about Case New Holland. They've got plants in primarily Wisconsin and Iowa. They've got a bunch of folks that are striking basically for the same reasons John Deere workers are striking. Mm-hmm. They want to get paid more. CNH is coming off a huge year. Brought about in the article again, it was brought up about how well compensated their CEO is. And basically one of the things that this brought up was a group of senators, our very own Tammy Baldwin being one of them, Bernie Sanders, Sanders, another, and a group of others are basically getting involved now because one of the big issues is healthcare costs. They're looking at trying to give these folks a less than 2% pay increase while healthcare costs have gone up. The deductible has gone up significantly. So basically more out-of-pocket expense. It's not being compensated for in the raise that they're looking for. And I thought this was interesting for a couple reasons. Number one, it's right after John Deere. Okay, we saw the folks at John Deere get their pay increase, and now we just saw some jobs going down to Mexico. Also interesting that we've got some senators, some actually very high, big name senators getting involved in this plight and actually going to these facilities, trying to help these folks out. This also comes in, and again, I mentioned it before, all those reshoring numbers. So we've got this interesting dynamic. We've got all these jobs coming in. We've got current employees who are saying now is the time for us to try to get a better pay package because it is hard to hire people. There is a job market shortage. But is that starting to turn a little bit? And I just wonder, number one, is the influence of these customers, or excuse me, these senators, because a couple of them are rather polarizing. I don't think there's a lot of middle-of-the-road feelings about Bernie Sanders. Does that help the cause or not? And secondly, do these workers, are we starting to see some of these situations where workers are striking, do they still have the same clout that we thought they did maybe even 6 months ago?
I definitely think things are shifting, and it's a constantly evolving market. I do think there's still leverage, but maybe since we're a little bit further out of the pandemic, companies feel a little bit more emboldened to push back a little bit.
I think so too, and especially again, Mexico's just getting hot again in terms of people because it's that near-shoring approach.
Summer.
Logistically, you can get
Sorry.
Not so much for vacation.
I apologize. I couldn't help myself.
For near-shoring, because it is logistically close and stuff like that. So that is becoming more popular. And this is, CNH is actually owned in the UK. It's a British company. It's actually where it's headquartered. So that'll be interesting to see how all these different variables play out. And I'm really, whenever I see politicians get involved this heavily in a labor movement or a strike like this, I just wonder if sometimes it doesn't make people dig in more the opposite way as opposed to being influenced. And again, I think that becomes more of a personal thing, unfortunately, as opposed to a business practice or what's best for the company or the employees. But just interesting to see them getting involved at this level and with all those other dynamics sort of coming into play.
It becomes one more hurdle for both the workers and the company. And you're right. Like, are you helping or are you just, either way, one thing is that people don't really know about the CNH work stoppage. Everyone knew about the Deere stoppage. So they really didn't need to shine a spotlight on that one because the whole world knew. So maybe some of these senators getting involved, if anything, lets people know that, hey, there's another problem here, and the workers are looking for something similar. Anna, your thoughts on the senators getting involved?
I do agree that there is like a shift happening in terms of people's sentiment on the economy and people getting a little nervous about what happens next. However, like with a strike, I feel like you're in a sort of pants on fire situation. Like every day that goes is like more. They're sweating this out, and there's no impact quite yet of this potential recession or downturn that we're facing. Probably CNH has a significant backlog still, I'm thinking. If they're like Deere. So I don't know that the pressure of that future scenario is going to be enough to cause them to really push back too much on these workers. I think it will fall in the workers' favor. That's my guess.
All right. Well, let's move on to our final thoughts before we get out of here. And luckily, my wife is watching the podcast live, and she can confirm the basement monkeys.
These are stuffed monkeys, right?
Yes, but again, stuffed animal monkeys, not stuffed monkeys. Anna, what's your final thought this week?
Thank you. My final thought is this. So I've managed to go my entire lifetime without ever tent camping.
Oh.
Yeah.
Really?
I know, somehow. I've skated by.
Like not even in like high school?
Never one time.
Wow.
And somehow I got roped into taking my family camping this weekend. My daughter's had like a little cold, so we're going to see if it works out. But our plan is tomorrow to go to the state park to meet some friends and tent camp with my family. So
Man.
see how that goes. I don't know what. For the record, like 3 little kids sleeping on the ground. My husband will be there also, but I don't know what happens. I don't know if this is a good idea or not.
I know that camping without children, we have not attempted
Yeah.
Camping with children either. But it's already pretty logistically tough when it's 2 adults.
Yeah.
So so when we're up at the cottage, all of us sleep in the same room, and until very recently, we all slept in the same bed. And that alone was just enough to be like, oh, okay, so we're not going to get great sleep. We're going to get up at 4:30 in the morning. And I mean, that drive home is going to be touch and go sometimes.
Yeah, I did enough camping in the Army, so if I never see the inside of a tent or improvised shelter or anything else, I'm good.
You guys.
When you're camping, please go to one of your friends and be like, nice improvised shelter.
Yeah.
Guys, that was the boost I needed going
Yeah.
into this weekend.
Make
Thank
sure
you for the
take
positive thoughts.
Plenty of because if it rains,
Yeah.
that's the worst. Make sure you have enough ponchos and everything else to cover everything if
Jeff,
it rains.
I don't have
No,
any
Get some.
ponchos.
Get
I
'em.
don't-
No, that's
Get
not
'em.
true.
Get 'em.
I can't agree with Jeff there. If it rains, you just get everything in the car.
You just
and go.
leave, right? Yeah,
just
okay.
that. No,
And that's for
Better
sure what we
idea.
would do.
Better
yeah, like I don't know. I just standard weekend stuff with the kids. Were like, just run them all day, keep them in the sun, so hopefully they just hit that bed, and crash.
So they invited us on this camping trip, and then my husband literally that day buys a 9-person tent on Amazon.
Whoa.
And then
It's a big swing.
I know. And then like a couple days ago, he's like, "Are we really doing this?" And I'm like, "Yes, you bought a 9-person tent. We're doing
Do
this."
you all have
It's like,
sleeping bags too?
yeah. So I don't know. What else do you need?
Patience. A lot of patience and tarps.
Yes.
Can't have enough tarps.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alex.
A lot of tarps.
Thank you.
Okay.
Tarps.
Guys, I'm really nervous about this.
Also,
Bug spray.
You could have
Bug spray have.
asked anybody. I mean, about tents. We have like 3 tents you could have borrowed.
Yeah.
Just everyone in Wisconsin has that tent that they use like twice a decade.
I think he wanted to buy the tent, and it was an excuse to buy it because he likes to camp, and I've always been a little resistant.
Yeah.
So this is probably his way, his entree into like, this is our life now. I don't know.
He likes to tent. You've been married like what, a decade?
Yep.
And still no
9 years, yeah,
camping?
almost, yeah.
Okay. Well, you know what? Just
Why is that weird?
Oh, because she says that he loves to camp, but she's never gone.
Yeah.
But they've been together 10 years.
Yeah, that's all right. You can figure out an excuse for that 1,000 times. Yeah.
Like, s'mores and those little like pudgy pie makers.
Yeah.
And then you're
That's true.
or in a walking taco. The first time I had a walking taco as a kid blew my mind. I was just like, I just eat this bag
Right out of the bag?
right out of it was great.
The pudgy pie things, don't sleep on those, man. You can make some awesome grilled cheese in those.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
See? You guys want to go now, I feel like.
No.
Well, we have room for 4 more people in our tent.
I'm good.
I love camping. I don't
That's
like the
you
logistics
guys,
of it. Everyone's invited. Well, good luck.
Thanks.
All right, so my final thought this week is so Wednesday, our softball game got rained out, but it wound up being a beautiful afternoon. It just so happens that the Parks Department is real careful with their fields. So to burn a little energy off, I went on a bike ride, and I went on a long bike ride. And right as I was about to get home, I like checked my phone and realized that I had like 3 missed messages from my wife.
Oh, no.
I'm like, oh God, one of the kids are sick. And she was like really scared. She thought that she might have heard fireworks or maybe gunshots. And so I was just like, okay, she kind of downplayed it a little bit. I'm like, all right, well, it's probably fireworks because we got a lot of kids in the neighborhood. And then I was riding my bike back down on Acewood, and there are cops everywhere. And I stopped, I talked to the cops, I'm like, yo, what happened? And these guys are 3 houses away from mine, 3 houses down the block. They're like, yeah, we had a report of a possible shooting. Somebody from a car shot at a pedestrian. He ran up the road to the gas station, which was littered with cops. But we haven't been able to find any shell casings, so we really don't know if it happened. I'm like, all right, well, thanks for all the work you do. Hope you figure it out. I ride my bike back to my house, found a shell casing. So I just like stopped my bike. I'm like, hey, got one right here. And started talking to them, and they were just like joking. They're like, haha, you want a job as a police officer? I'm like, no, I'm already scared. I'm gonna go home, all right? So I go home, talk to my wife, who's visibly shaken because she downplayed it a little bit. She was outside gardening, heard the two pops, looked out. She was right by the road, looked at the road, saw the car, which sped away, and saw the person run. And we've both never been so scared. And like I said, it was right outside my house. It was actually a former coworker. It was directly outside his house. And I just think that I say be better a lot on this podcast. And I just think that everyone from every walk of life just needs to do a better job at being a better person, because our entire neighborhood is terrified right now.
Oh my God.
I feel like I shouldn't be able to, or like I can't talk about it because it's gun related, and everything gun related right now is completely politicized and polarized. But there's a simple fact that this situation happened. It was incredibly scary. There's no good answer except people trying harder to be better people.
Wow.
And that's my final thought this week. Jeff?
Okay. That's terrifying.
It is terrifying. Like, you should never have to check your kids and then make sure that there's not a hole in the wall.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I was didn't mean to spring that on you guys, but it was just
That's crazy.
It's kind of stuck with us. And we were talking about remodeling. We've talked about it a lot on the podcast, and we started calling our house our forever home, and then it was just like, okay, let's start talking about where we're gonna move.
Wow. Yeah.
Because I mean, it's something like that that really shakes you to the core, and just like, okay, it's one thing to try and stick it out. It's another to like put my family in danger. But anyway, sorry to be a...
That's a lot, man. Wow.
Yeah. Especially with Carrie being outside.
Yeah.
Man.
No, it is crazy. And so just, be better people and be safer and be aware that there are other people around you in the event that you're going to make a terrible choice.
Well, in comparison, my week was nowhere near as eventful. Mm-hmm. All I would say is my final thought is I can confirm with what Anna was saying before, that COVID-19 is still real. We had to kind of run through the house a little bit. It was definitely disruptive this week. So, yeah, still need to be safe and better. And
still catching COVID, yeah.
Well, and
still real.
But everyone is feeling better now.
Yeah,
right?
Everybody's good. I mean, I think the precautions we took before definitely paid off.
Yeah.
So that was good. Transitioning to our trivia, I guess, to wrap stuff up here. The question last week, we wanted to know which automaker has seen the highest level of engagement on our sites in the last year. Far and away, it would have been Tesla. So Tesla was not one of the options. We said, was it Ford, GM, Toyota, Stellantis, or Nissan? The answer is Ford. Ford definitely did get the most. I think a lot of the Mustang, the F-150, the electric F-150 coming out definitely propelled them. Oh. And congratulations to Joe. He got it right. He's getting Today in Manufacturing hat.
Way to go,
per
Joe.
his request. Also wanted to give a shout out here to Nick. The last 2 weeks, Nick has responded for the first time to the trivia questions, and he got the second most popular.
Oh, man, so close.
So I said, Nick, great try. Let us send you something. And his response is something that I think we should all feel good about. He says, I appreciate the offer for a shirt, but until I win it fairly, it just won't feel right.
He's got to earn it.
Don't worry. I am not giving up yet.
Yes.
Nick, I hope you get that. We are all rooting for you.
We are.
Yeah.
Your virtue and dedication to this podcast and the trivia responses is greatly appreciated. And what we can all appreciate most is the final comment in his email was, I just hope my wife doesn't get it right this week or I'll never hear the end of it. Nick, we are with you, my brother, and we hope you can get this week's answer correct.
100%. Don't worry, Nick. I have not gotten one right either.
So,
this one was a coin toss.
So, sticking with this trend we've had the last couple of weeks, let's talk about some of the companies we cover, because I know when we see certain stories for certain companies, we're like, this is going to work. This is going to get a lot of page views. This is going to work. People are going to like hearing about this. So these are the companies that I picked out. I want to know which one of these over the last year had the highest level of engagement on our sites. Okay? John Deere, SpaceX, Boeing, Amazon, or Harley Davidson. These are all companies that definitely get a lot of eyeballs. Again, your options. Which one was first? John Deere, SpaceX, Boeing, Amazon, or Harley Davidson? Let me know.
And at least
It's a tough one.
4 out of those 5 are in the news almost daily.
The difference between the top 3 is tight.
Yeah, well, that's but the one outlier that I was thinking of maybe doesn't have news every day, but when we do have news about that company, it is incredibly popular.
Yeah.
So,
all right. So this is a tough one. Hoping Nick can pull it off.
Come on, Nick!
And hopefully his wife doesn't give him too much crap when she gets it right.
Man.
Or we can send her a T-shirt too. I don't know.
Not getting trivia right and crap from the wife. Nick. All right. All right. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. Finally, if you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at in.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Finally, you can subscribe to our daily and weekly newsletters. Make sure you get the make sure you get the podcast delivered to your inbox first. Also, Lindsay Parsons, thanks for sending the awesome use of a wind tunnel. I really appreciate it. All right, for Jeff and Anna, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast. We'll see you next week.